The silence in our penthouse is a physical presence, thick and heavy as velvet. I stand at the floor-to-ceiling window, my reflection a ghostly superimposition over the glittering tapestry of the city below. The digital clock on the minimalist marble console behind me switches from 11:59 to 12 o'clock. Midnight. The official start of my 10th anniversary with Gabriel Thorne. A decade. The number echoes in the vast, empty space. It stretches from the gritty, exhilarating struggle of our early 20s, surviving on instant noodles in a studio apartment that smelled of damp and ambition, to the polished, dizzying success of our 30s. Now we lived in a cloud-scraping era, a testament to Gabriel's prowess as a named partner at the city's most formidable law firm, Thorne and Crestwell. My own career, once equally promising, had been willingly backburnered, then all but extinguished to fuel his ascent. I had been his strategist, his confidant, his unwavering support. And I had believed with every fiber of my being that our shared success was enough. But the other side of our king-sized bed, made with hospital corners by the daily cleaner, was cold and unrumpled. Gabriel was in Milan, finalizing a merger that would be the crowning achievement of his career. With him was his new assistant Sophia. Young, preternaturally sleek Sophia, with her razor-sharp bob and an ambition that glittered as brightly as her designer knockoff earrings. A low thrum of anxiety, a familiar and unwelcome guest these past few months, tightened its coil in my stomach. I had called him 13 times since morning my time. Each call had pulsed into the void, unanswered, before being dismissed by his impersonal voicemail greeting. My lawyer's mind, a muscle I'd let atrophy, offered rational excuses. The 7-hour time difference, back-to-back meetings in hushed, intimidating boardrooms, the all-consuming focus required to close a deal of this magnitude. My heart, the part of me that was still the girl who fell for a brilliant, hungry law student, offered a more primal, terrifying explanation. As if on a cruel, cosmic cue, my phone screen illuminated the dim room. A social media notification. Sophia had posted a video. My thumb, suddenly clumsy, hovered over the screen before tapping it. The video was a jumble of noise and movement. The camera shook with laughter, capturing the opulent, shadowy interior of what was unmistakably a high-end Milanese bar. And there he was, just behind Sophia's smug, smiling face, caught in the dim, golden light, Gabriel Thorne. His head was thrown back in a laugh I knew intimately, the one that crinkled the corners of his eyes. His fingers, those elegant, persuasive fingers that could draft a contract that shifted millions or trace a path down my spine that made me forget my own name, were working the buttons of his tailored shirt. The fabric fell open. The light caught the defined planes of his chest, the familiar terrain of his body now a public spectacle for Sophia's followers. The caption beneath the video was a punch to the gut. Milan with the legendary Mr. Thorne is the ultimate masterclass. He teaches me corporate warfare by day, and the art of living by night. #blessed, #learning from the best. The air left my lungs in a rush. The phone felt like a block of ice in my hand. The rationalizations, the excuses, the years of built-up trust. It all shattered in an instant, leaving behind a cold, clear certainty. The ringing of my phone was a shock so violent I almost dropped it. Gabriel, the screen flashed. I stared at it, watching it vibrate against my palm, a trapped, angry insect. On the fourth ring, some deep-seated autopilot took over. I swiped to answer and held the phone to my ear, saying nothing. Isabella. His voice was a whip-crack tight with an irritation I hadn't heard directed at me in years. It was the voice he used with junior associates who failed to site-check properly. What is this? 13 missed calls? Are you trying to give me a heart attack mid-negotiation? You've terrified Sophia. She's practically in hysterics. For God's sake, she's just a kid. It was a joke. A stupid, harmless social media joke. Weren't you ever young and impulsive? The accusations were a preemptive strike, a volley of misdirection launched with no regard for why his fiancée of 10 years, a woman who prided herself on her independence, would be frantically trying to reach him. There was no, "Are you okay?" No, "What's wrong?" Just immediate, defensive anger. The cold clarity that had filled me a moment ago solidified into something unshakable. I held the phone a few inches from my ear. My voice when it came out was not my own. It was calm, flat, devoid of all the heat and pain churning inside me. Let's break up, Gabriel. The silence on the other end was profound. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his brilliant, calculating mind, recalibrating his strategy. When he spoke again, his tone had cooled into something dismissive, almost bored. Over a joke video? Seriously, Isabella? This is what we're doing now. He let out a short, humorless laugh. Let's review the tally, shall we? In the last 8 months you've threatened to end things twice. Don't you think you're crying wolf? Aren't you afraid I might just finally agree? He sighed, a long, suffering sound designed to make me feel unreasonable. I know you're feeling insecure. You've been out of the game for a while and you're not 25 anymore. You see a young pretty girl and you get worried. But be rational. First, she doesn't think of me that way. Second, am I really that much of a monster in your eyes? That irresponsible? Fine. You win. What is it you want this time? A skywriter over the city? A proposal flash mob in the firm's lobby? I'll do it. We'll get married at New Year's. Will that finally put your mind at ease? I didn't reply. I simply ended the call and dropped the phone onto the cool marble console. It clattered loudly in the overwhelming silence. The man on the phone was a stranger. The 10-year path we had walked together had just abruptly terminated at a cliff's edge. And for the first time I felt no fear of falling, only a chilling certainty that I had already been pushed. I stood there for a long time watching the city lights twinkle, each one a tiny life utterly disconnected from my own. The numbness began to recede, replaced by a slow-burning anger. It wasn't the hot, messy anger of a fight. It was a cold, focused fury. He had dismissed me. He had diminished my valid fear and rage into the hysterics of an insecure woman. He had chosen in that moment to protect her feelings over mine. I walked to the kitchen, my steps echoing in the vast space. I opened the pantry and looked at the jars of herbs I had meticulously collected for his throat. Licorice root, slippery elm, ginger. I picked up the jar of ginger, its spicy scent suddenly nauseating. This was who I had become. The keeper of his comfort, the soother of his ailments, while he offered my vulnerability up as a sacrifice to another woman's ego. I didn't throw the jar. I placed it back on the shelf with a quiet finality. The ritual was over. The care was over. The fight, I realized with a startling clarity, was over too. I wasn't going to argue, to plead, to list my grievances. He had shown me who he was in that phone call. My only job now was to believe him. I went to my laptop, the one I used for the scant freelance work I did to feel connected to the person I used to be. I opened a blank document. The cursor blinked, a tiny, impatient heartbeat. I had nowhere to go, no one to call. My family was thousands of miles away. My friends had faded into the background of a life dominated by Gabriel's ambitions. But I had myself. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like enough to start with. I began to type. Not a letter to him. There were no words left for him. I began to draft a plan. A plan for me. It started with 2 words written in bold at the top of the page. What now? The answer, I knew, would not be found in this penthouse, a gilded cage built on the corpse of my own dreams. The answer was out there, somewhere beyond the glittering skyline. And I was going to find it. 3 days later, the key turned in the polished steel lock of the penthouse door. I was at the dining table, my laptop open, the plan I'd started now a detailed multi-tap spreadsheet. I didn't look up. Gabriel Thorne entered, the very picture of weary triumph. He looked every inch the conquering hero returning from the battlefield of high finance. He was tanned from the Italian sun, dressed in a suit that cost more than our first year's rent, and he moved with the ingrained confidence of a man who owned every room he walked into. He dropped his leather weekender onto the pristine white floor with a thud, not bothering with the closet, and collapsed onto the vast cream-colored sectional sofa with a theatrical groan. Isabella. His voice was a gravelly rasp. He cleared his throat, wincing. The tea, darling? My throat is absolutely shredded. 12-hour days in air-conditioned rooms, then shouting over dinner in smoky piazzas. My sinuses are a war zone. My fingers didn't pause their typing. The familiar request, which had once been a thread stitching our lives together, now felt like a demand from a stranger. It's in the pantry. Second shelf. The kettle is next to the sink. He looked up, surprised by the lack of movement, the absence of concern. The performance wasn't getting its expected audience. His expression shifted, becoming coaxing. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a small black velvet box. Don't be like that, Bella. Come on. Look, I come bearing gifts. A peace offering. A 10th anniversary gift. He opened the box with a flourish. Inside, nestled against the satin, wasn't the solitaire engagement ring I had once, long ago, hinted at. It was a delicate, whimsical pinky ring, a tiny, intricate dragon coiled around a minuscule diamond. It was fashionable, expensive, and utterly impersonal. Saw it in a boutique window near the Duomo. Thought of you immediately. Try it on. It's Van Cleef. Exquisite, isn't it? I finally looked away from my screen, my eyes meeting his for a brief, unreadable moment before flicking down to the ring. Did you pick it out yourself? A flicker of something, guilt, annoyance, passed behind his eyes. His voice took on a defensive, slightly louder edge. Sophia did, actually. She has a fantastic eye for this sort of thing. She said an engagement ring needs to be a joint decision, a custom design, and that this was more of a celebratory piece. A marker of the anniversary itself. The sales associate said it was the most sought-after piece of the season. What, is that wrong now too? Is my gift not up to your standards? I said nothing. I simply extended my right hand across the space between them, my palm down, my fingers relaxed. Then put it on me. He smiled, a flash of victory, believing he had navigated the crisis. He took the ring from the box and moved to slide it onto the little finger of my right hand. The cool metal touched my skin, then caught. It jammed against the crooked, misaligned joint of my finger, a grotesque and ill-fitting shackle on my pale, slender hand. He froze. His face went through a rapid series of transformations. Confusion, dawning horror, and finally a sickening realization. He had forgotten. The memory was a ghost that slammed into both of us at once. 7 years ago. A rain-slicked road. A swerving car. I, with a reaction born of pure instinct, had shoved Gabriel out of its path. The car's mirror had caught my hand, crushing my little finger against a lamppost. We were broke. Deeply in debt. The $15,000 compensation from the driver's insurance had felt like a fortune. Gabriel had a final round interview at Thorne and Crestwell. This is it, Bella, he'd said, his eyes alight. This is our break. We used the money to pay off 6 months of back rent and to buy him a single, impeccable, life-changing suit. My finger was set quickly and cheaply at a walk-in clinic. Proper orthopedic surgery was a luxury we couldn't fathom. It wasn't until a week later, when I cried out in my sleep from the pain, that he realized I'd never followed up. That night, in our cramped, damp studio, he had held my bandaged hand to his chest, his tears wet against my skin. I will love you and cherish you forever, Isabella Rossi, he had sworn, his voice thick with emotion. Everything I am, everything I will ever be is because of you. I will never forget this. So much for forever. His forever had expired before the decade was out. The ring, chosen by the woman who was usurping my place, was a cruel joke on an injury he had sworn to remember. He stood there, the ring held awkwardly between his thumb and forefinger, his lips moving soundlessly, unable to form an apology that could possibly be adequate. I gave a short, cold laugh that held no humor. I pulled my hand back, the ring falling onto the glass coffee table with a tiny, insignificant clink. It seems Sophia's fantastic eye doesn't extend to anatomy. The brutal tension was shattered by the soft, electronic beep of the keypad. The front door swung open silently. Sophia tiptoed in, holding Gabriel's forgotten laptop case like a sacred offering. She froze mid-step, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. Gabriel's stunned guilt, my icy composure. "Oh!" she exclaimed, a perfect pantomime of flustered innocence. "Mr. Thorne. Isabella. You're both here. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." Her gaze darted between us, expertly playing the role of the chastised child. Mr. Thorne left his laptop in the car service. I thought with the jet lag he'd be asleep. I didn't want to wake him. I just wanted to drop it off. She hugged the laptop case to her chest, a shield. My voice was like chips of ice. "You know the door code." It wasn't a question. Sophia's lower lip trembled on cue. "He gave it to me. Months ago. Just to drop off some urgent filings when he was working from home. I know you don't like me, Isabella, but there is nothing improper going on. I'm his assistant. It's my job to be helpful." Her voice took on a wounded, righteous tone. "I'm just doing my job. A very dedicated job. I countered, my eyes cold and assessing. Including calling him at midnight when you get your period because you need ginger tea? Texting him to come over because you found a cockroach in your apartment and are too scared to sleep? Somehow always managing to bump into us at our favorite restaurant? And now, posting videos of him half-dressed and barging into his home. You're the very picture of professional innocence. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, sparkling with practiced perfection. She turned her gaze to Gabriel, a silent plea for rescue. Isabella, that's enough, Gabriel said, his voice firm. He walked over to Sophia, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. The gesture was a betrayal in itself. She was just being kind. Don't be so harsh. He looked down at Sophia, his expression a mix of exasperation and indulgence. And you need to learn some boundaries. Now apologize to Isabella. Sophia stiffened, the picture of stubborn virtue. I didn't do anything wrong, she sniffed, staring up at him with doe-eyed devotion. I just feel terrible for you. You've been working so hard and I didn't want you to be without your notes for tomorrow's meeting. Her performance was masterful. My fury, held in check by a thread of sheer will, finally snapped. I pulled out my phone, my movements precise and lethal. Entering a private residence without explicit permission is wrong. It's trespassing. Since your esteemed boss, the lawyer, seems to have neglected your legal education, perhaps the police can provide a lesson. Enough. Gabriel's voice boomed through the penthouse. He crossed the room in 3 strides and snatched the phone from my hand. Don't be an irrational shrew, Isabella. You're the one who doesn't understand the law. This penthouse. It's in my name. The mortgage, the deed, it's all mine. If I allow her to be here, she can be here. She is not trespassing. Get a grip. The silence that followed was absolute, more deafening than any shout. Sophia's mask slipped for a microsecond, a flash of pure, unadulterated triumph directed straight at me. I looked at Gabriel, at the man I had loved, supported, and saved. He was now using his legal expertise, the career I had helped build, as a weapon to defend another woman in our home. The last thread snapped. I walked to the foyer, picked up my handbag from the console where it had sat for 3 days, waiting for his return. You're right, I said, my voice eerily calm. It's your house. I turned to leave. Sophia, sensing a chance to play the magnanimous peacemaker, rushed to block my path. No, don't. Please. I'll apologize, okay? If you storm out like this, he'll just have to chase after you. He's exhausted. He needs to rest. Her concern was a sickening parody. She reached out and gripped my forearm, her sharp, manicured nails digging into the skin. I yanked my arm free with a force born of pure revulsion. The movement was swift, sharp. The crack of my open palm against Sophia's cheek was a shocking, percussive sound in the sterile silence. I didn't wait to see Gabriel's reaction, didn't look at Sophia's stunned, reddening face. I turned, wrenched the heavy door open and stepped out into the hallway, pulling it shut behind me with a final, echoing slam. I didn't look back. There was nothing left in that penthouse for me anymore. The hallway was quiet, carpeted, impersonal. The elevator ride down was a silent descent from one life to another. The doors opened into the gleaming lobby. The night doorman Carlos looked up from his desk, his expression shifting from boredom to surprise. Ms. Rossi? Everything all right? Do you need me to call a car? I managed a tight smile. No thank you, Carlos. I'm fine. I walked out into the cool night air, the city sounds rushing in to fill the silence that had been left in me. I stood on the sidewalk, the towering building at my back, and took a deep, shuddering breath. I was out. Now what? My phone buzzed in my bag. Another message from Gabriel. I didn't read it. I opened my ride-sharing app. I needed to get away from here. I needed to think. I needed to find a hotel, a room, any space that was not touched by his presence. As I waited for the car, I looked up at the penthouse windows high above, glowing against the night sky. I felt a strange detachment. That wasn't my home. It was just a beautiful box where a part of me had slowly been erased. The anger was still there, a cold, hard stone in my gut, but it was now joined by something else. A terrifying, exhilarating sense of freedom. The path ahead was dark and unknown, but for the first time in a decade, it was mine alone to walk. The underground garage was a cold, concrete womb, silent except for the hum of a distant ventilation system. My heels clicked sharply on the painted floor, the sound amplifying my isolation. There they were, side by side like a museum exhibit of our rise and fall. His hulking black Range Rover autobiography and my sleek crimson Ferrari Portofino. The Ferrari had been a gift. Sorry, after the second time I had threatened to leave a year ago, when Sophia's clumsy, admiring behavior had first started to cross lines. He'd just been made a partner. "It's in your name, Bella," he'd said, pressing the keys into my hand, his eyes full of a contrition that now seemed like a well-rehearsed act. "Everything I have is yours." We'd taken it on a drive out to the coast, the wind whipping through our hair, and for a few hours, the cracks had been papered over with speed and luxury. My eyes drifted to the Range Rover and I stopped dead. The passenger seat. It was adorned with a collection of garish pink accessories. A sequined cushion with a cartoon crown, a fluffy white faux fur throw, and tucked into the sun visor, a handwritten sign in glitter pen on neon pink cardstock. Princess Sophia's throne. A memory sharp and painful lanced through me. Soon after he'd bought the Rover, I'd wanted to put a simple beige lumbar support cushion in that seat. My back had been aching from stress. He'd laughed, a warm, affectionate sound I now reevaluated. "Bella, no. It's a boardroom on wheels. I can't have a granny cushion in here. It ruins the entire professional aesthetic." Apparently his professional aesthetic had been radically redefined by Sophia. Pink sequins and glitter were now acceptable. Principles, it seemed, were flexible when applied to a pretty young assistant who looked at him with starry-eyed admiration. The old love, the one built on sacrifice and shared history, was no match for the new, shiny flame. A sound escaped me, something between a sob and a laugh. I unlocked the Ferrari and slid into the driver's seat. The interior smelled of clean leather and faintly of Gabriel's cologne. I started the engine, the low, powerful growl a comforting vibration. I drove aimlessly for over an hour, the city lights blurring into streaks of color. As the adrenaline faded, a crushing emptiness yawned wide open within me. The chilling realization dawned: I had nowhere to go. My family lived in a small, picturesque town in the Colorado Rockies, over 2,000 kilometers away. I had chosen Gabriel over them, over their quiet concerns, over their wish for me to stay closer to home. All my friends from law school, the fierce, brilliant women I debated with and dreamed with, had slowly faded away. Gabriel's insecurity, his subtle and sometimes not so subtle possessiveness, had made maintaining those friendships a constant low-grade battle I'd eventually grown too tired to fight. My entire world had been the firm and then him. Now the firm was his and he was, what? A stranger. I had poured every ounce of my ambition, my intelligence and my love into Gabriel Thorne. And now, at 30, I was alone in a sports car, adrift in a city of millions. I found myself parked on a deserted overlook. The city sprawled out below me like a bed of jewels. The memory of my mother's tear-streaked face surfaced, unbidden. 3 years ago I'd gotten pregnant. It was an accident, coming right as Gabriel was making his final push for partner. "We can't, Bella," he'd said, holding my hands, his eyes pained. "Not now. The timing is catastrophic." I had gritted my teeth and gone through with determination. My mother had flown out, taken care of me during a brief, bleak recovery. Looking at my pale, drained face, she had wept. "You'll regret this one day, my girl. You're giving up too much of yourself for this man." Was this the regret she meant? This hollow, echoing emptiness? My phone, sitting in the passenger seat, lit up with a notification. A message from Gabriel. "I sent Sophia home in a cab. I've changed the door code. It won't happen again. I'm not cheating on you and she's not that kind of girl. You're completely overreacting." A moment later, a banking app notification flashed. "A transfer. $50,000. You've been under a lot of stress. Take this. Go to a spa. Go to Paris. Relax. When this insane period at work is over, we'll sit down and set a firm wedding date. That should put your mind at ease, right?" I stared at the screen. The condescension was breathtaking. My pain, my valid fury, was reduced to stress. Our marriage was now a transactional tool, a firm date, to be set like a business meeting, a favor he was granting to placate me. He truly didn't understand. He believed he could still buy my compliance, my silence. Before the wave of despair could fully crest, another message popped up from an unknown number. "Hey Isabella. It's Julian. Julian Vega. You said a few weeks ago you might be open to a change. The offer to come to Sydney and help me launch our Asian division still stands. I just saw Gabriel asking for wedding planner recommendations in the alumni group. Does that mean you're off the market? Julian Vega. My old debate captain from law school. My equal, my intellectual match. The one everyone, including a part of myself, had expected me to end up with. I had chosen the brooding, intense Gabriel over the warm, steady Julian. I had chosen potential over stability. A spark ignited in the void. It was small, but it was mine. I typed my reply, my fingers steady for the first time all night. We broke up. And I never go back on my word. My visa's already processed. Tell me when and where. Let's go make a dent in the universe. I didn't accept the money. I didn't reply to Gabriel. I started the car, pointed it toward the city, and drove toward a future that, for the first time in a long time, was entirely my own. I found a boutique hotel, paid for a week with my own credit card. A small, defiant act of independence. The room was small, anonymous, and blessedly quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed, my laptop open. The tab with my "what now" plan was staring back at me. I began to research. Australian business visas, the housing market in Sydney, the specific legal requirements for practicing there. I reached out to a few old contacts, carefully worded emails that spoke of new opportunities and professional shifts, not heartbreak. With each typed word, each sent email, the hollow feeling inside me began to fill with something solid. Purpose. Gabriel continued to text, his messages shifting from condescending to pleading to angry. I read them all, a clinical part of me noting the stages of his unraveling. Then I deleted them. His voice, both literal and digital, was becoming background noise, fading against the much louder, more compelling sound of my own plans clicking into place. A week later, my suitcase was packed. It contained only my things, clothes I had chosen for myself, books that were mine alone. I left the Ferrari keys and the penthouse fob in the hotel safe deposit box, with instructions to courier them to Gabriel's office. I wanted no tether, no excuse for him to find me. On the way to the airport, I allowed myself one last look at the city skyline. I wasn't leaving in defeat. I was departing on a mission. I was going to find the woman I had been before I became Gabriel's Isabella. And I had a feeling she was waiting for me in Sydney, ready to get to work. The spark that had ignited on that overlook was now a steady flame. I was scared, yes. But I was also, for the first time in a decade, entirely my own. And that was everything. The Australian summer was a physical assault in the best way possible. Stepping out of the Kingsford Smith Airport terminal was like walking into a wall of heat, thick and heavy with the salty tang of the Pacific. After the cold, sterile elegance of my life with Gabriel, it felt vibrant, messy, and intensely alive. Julian Vega was waiting at the arrival's gate just as he'd promised. He wasn't holding a sign. He just leaned against a pillar, looking effortlessly at ease in a linen shirt and chinos. A decade had been kind to him. It had sanded off the youthful eagerness and replaced it with a relaxed, confident polish. But his smile was exactly the same, a wide, genuine affair that reached his warm, brown eyes and made the corners crinkle. "Isabella Rossi," he said, pushing off the pillar and taking my carry-on bag. "Welcome to the bottom of the world. You're a long way from home." His gaze was assessing but kind, taking in my undoubtedly jet-lagged appearance. "The city awaits, but first coffee. The good stuff. You look like you need it." The easy familiarity was a balm. There was no awkwardness, no unspoken history hanging heavy between us. It was as if we'd just seen each other yesterday at a moot court competition, ready to take on the world side by side. He drove me through Sydney, pointing out landmarks with the proud nonchalance of a local. The Harbour Bridge, the Opera House gleaming in the sun, it was all a breathtaking postcard come to life. He'd booked me a serviced apartment in Circular Quay with a view that made my penthouse with Gabriel seem claustrophobic in its perfection. "Work can wait a week," he declared, setting my suitcase down in the living room. "You can't run a Pan-Pacific legal strategy on jet lag and caffeine fumes. I'm your tour guide. My only agenda is to remind you what sunlight feels like." And so he did. For the next 7 days, Julian was a perfect patient guide. We walked Bondi to Coogee Coastal Path, the turquoise water crashing against the cliffs below. We ate fish and chips from paper wrappers on Manly Beach, our toes in the sand. We got gloriously lost in the Royal Botanic Garden, and he laughed not at me but with me when I tried to imitate a kookaburra's call. Under the immense Australian sky, I felt the tightly wound coil of myself begin to loosen. The persona I'd adopted for years, the supportive fiancé, the polished partner, the unflappable Isabella Thornton-to-be, began to slough away. I found myself really talking about things that had nothing to do with merger clauses or shareholder agreements. I laughed, a real, unforced laugh that came from my belly, and the sound surprised me. I had been cheerful and outgoing once, a ball of fiery ambition and quick wit. But Gabriel's insecurities, his need to be the sole star in my sky, had demanded I dim my light. I'd slowly distanced myself from friends, my world shrinking to the size of his orbit. Now that suppressed personality was waking up, stretching its limbs in the sunshine, and it felt like coming home. One afternoon at a cliffside cafe in Watson's Bay, Julian took a picture of me. I was squinting against the sun, my hair a mess from the wind, laughing at something he'd said. I looked happy. "Can I post this?" he asked, showing me the photo. "Let the old gang know you've landed safely among the convicts." A month ago I would have hesitated. I would have considered Gabriel's reaction, his potential jealousy. Now I just smiled. Why not? It's not like I'm the one with something to hide. The day after he posted the photo, my newfound peace was shattered. I was returning to my apartment after a solo walk through the rocks when a figure emerged from a shadowed bench near my building's entrance. Gabriel. He was leaning heavily on a crutch, his usually impeccable suit rumpled and stained. He looked haggard, his face pale and stubbled, his eyes bloodshot and wild. The confident titan of industry was gone, replaced by a desperate, haunted man. "You've been in touch with him all along, haven't you?" he accused, his voice a raw scrape. He grabbed my wrist, his grip too tight. "This whole breakup was a calculated plan. You were lining up your escape route before you even left." The smell of stale travel and desperation on him turned my stomach. I wrenched my arm free. "I'm not you, Gabriel. Don't project your deceit onto me. If you hate Sophia that much, I'll fire her," he pleaded, the words tumbling out in a frantic rush. "Today. I'll do it right now. I swear to you, Isabella, I have never touched her." "Not like that." The lie was so audacious it was almost impressive. "Using your hands doesn't count as touching? Is that the legal definition now?" I asked, my voice cold and flat. He flinched as if I'd struck him. His bravado crumpled. He reached for me again, pulling me into a desperate, crushing embrace. "Don't go. Please. I know I was wrong. I was weak. But it didn't mean anything." A wave of pure visceral disgust surged up from my core. I shoved him away with all my strength, stumbling back, my hand flying to my mouth as I fought down a gag. He staggered, catching himself on his crutch. The look on his face was one of utter devastation. Don't be disgusted by me, Isabella," he stammered, his voice breaking. "I'm not dirty." "But I am," I stated, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. "Now, for the love of God, have some shred of dignity and stop harassing your ex." His eyes, wide with panic, suddenly narrowed into slits of red-rimmed anger. "After everything we built? You just throw it all away? Sophia is young, she went to Yale, her pedigree is just as good as yours. Aren't you afraid I might just be with her? That I'll replace you?" The petulance in his voice was the final confirmation of his utter blindness. I almost laughed. "Gabriel, I sincerely wish you both a long and profoundly unhappy life together. I'm begging you truly. I'm just not lucky enough. Only she deserves a prize like you. Now are you satisfied? I've been out all day and I'm exhausted. Goodbye. Don't let me keep you." I turned to walk away. Behind me I heard his teeth grind together. "Isabella," he called out, his voice dripping with a bitter, defeated venom. "You will regret this." I didn't look back. The spark he'd tried to extinguish was now a steady flame. I was in Australia. I was free. And I had work to do. I walked into my apartment, locked the door and leaned against it, my heart hammering. The confrontation had been jarring, but it had also been clarifying. He was still the same man, trying to manipulate, to threaten, to possess. But I was no longer the same woman. The sight of him, broken and desperate on my doorstep, didn't fill me with pity or a desire to fix him. It filled me with a renewed determination to never, ever go back. I went to my laptop and opened the file containing the business plans I'd copied from Gabriel's computer. Before, using them had felt like a strategic move. Now it felt like a moral imperative. I would use every ounce of knowledge I had, every advantage I could get, to build something that was mine. To ensure that the world he had built on my sacrifices would crumble, and that my own would rise from the ashes. The tour was over. It was time to get to work. The alumni gala was a sea of black ties and glittering dresses, held in a grand ballroom that overlooked the iconic harbor. I felt a thrill of nervous energy as I walked in on Julian's arm. The simple, elegant black gown I wore felt like armor. The woman who had fled a penthouse in tears was gone. In her place stood someone clear-eyed and formidable. That feeling lasted precisely until we crossed the threshold and the scene crystallized before us. There they were, Gabriel and Sophia, positioned near the champagne fountain like a carefully staged exhibit. He was back to his polished self, the picture of recovered elegance in a tuxedo that probably cost more than my first car. Sophia was draped in a shockingly expensive-looking blush-pink gown that clung to her in a way that screamed effort. A diamond necklace I was certain hadn't been in my jewelry box glittered at her throat. She clung to his arm as if he were a life raft in a choppy sea, her body angled toward his in a display of possessive intimacy that was meant for an audience. A perceptible hush fell over our immediate vicinity as people noticed Julian and me. The tension was a live wire. It was a blunt, well-meaning classmate, Mark, who finally broke it. "Isabella. Julian. Good to see you both." He gestured awkwardly between us. "So, are you two a thing now?" I answered with an easy smile that felt genuine. "No, I'm gloriously, happily single. Julian and I are business partners. Vagarasi Strategies." I let the new name hang in the air, a declaration of my new identity that was met with a few raised eyebrows and nods of approval. Sophia's face, which had been fixed in a simpering, adoring mask, twisted into something ugly and contemptuous. She couldn't help herself. The performance was too ingrained. "Partners," she sneered, her voice carrying over the soft classical music. "Or a rebound you had waiting in the wings the second you decided to cliff dive out of your relationship. Do you have any idea the pain you've caused him?" Her eyes were wide with faux concern, but the venom was unmistakable. Before I could even open my mouth to eviscerate her, Julian spoke. His tone was mild, almost conversational, but it cut through the noise like a scalpel. "You must be the famous assistant," he said, his lazy smile not quite reaching his eyes. He took a slow sip of his champagne. "The one who gets lessons in work by day and, what was it? The art of living by night." He let the phrase hang in the air, dripping with implication. "From what I observe, you might need to repeat a few of those night classes. The art of living seems to involve a tragic lack of class and a surplus of audacity." A few people nearby choked on their drinks, stifling laughs. Sophia's face flushed a mottled, furious red. She leaned her head heavily on Gabriel's shoulder, transforming into a wounded bird in an instant. "Gabriel," she whimpered, her eyes filling with on-demand tears. "I'm just too straightforward. I've embarrassed you. But I can't stand to see how she's treating you. You've been planning your proposal for months, and she was already monkey-barring to the next rich guy." Gabriel's face was a stone mask, but his eyes were locked on me, burning with a mixture of hatred and utter incomprehension. He couldn't process a world where he wasn't the victim, the misunderstood hero. It was a woman named Chloe, a fierce litigator I'd always admired, who spoke next. "For Christ's sake, Gabriel, what is your little side piece performing for? We all know who Isabella is. If she wanted to trade up, she wouldn't have picked you over Julian here when you were a broke scholarship student with 2 suits to your name." Another woman, Sarah, joined in, her voice laced with disdain. "Exactly. She's openly saying she's single, which means she dumped your ass. And she's not fused to Julian's arm like this one is to yours. Look at her, she's practically grafted to your side. If you were so devoted, you would have married her 5 years ago." The dam broke. Another classmate, David, laughed outright. "Yeah man. Last reunion, you were holding court about how not marrying Isabella would make you a sinner. Your ego is astronomical. Our valedictorian, the one who wiped the floor with all of us in mock trial, wasn't good enough for you." The table had turned completely. Not a single person was buying their act. Gabriel's jaw was clenched so tight I thought I could hear his teeth cracking. Sophia sat rigidly in her chair, her body trembling with a rage she could no longer contain. The spotlight they had so desperately sought was now burning them. They're just jealous, she hissed, shooting a look of pure, unadulterated hate at me. Her voice lost its whine, turning cold and sharp. Because I'm younger. What does she have that I don't? Everything, I replied, my voice calm, flat and final. It wasn't an insult. It was a simple statement of fact. Real tears of frustration and humiliation now spilled down Sophia's cheeks. She opened her mouth to shriek another retort, but Gabriel finally found his voice. Enough, he barked, his voice strangled. Chloe, however, wasn't having it. She put her hands on her hips. What are you yelling for? This was a perfectly good party until you and your homewrecker showed up and poisoned it. The vibe is thoroughly killed. Why don't you two just leave? Gabriel stood up stiffly, his chest heaving. He looked at me one last time, a look of sheer, bewildered fury, as if he couldn't understand why his world had stopped obeying his commands. Then he grabbed Sophia's arm, yanked her to her feet and stalked out of the ballroom, leaving a wake of stunned silence and then, slowly, a rising buzz of conversation in their wake. I turned to Julian, picked up my champagne flute and clinked it gently against his. Well, I said, my smile genuine and unforced now. That was bracing. Now shall we go network? I believe there are several general councils here I need to charm. The social war was over. I had won the battle of public opinion decisively. But as I moved through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging cards, I felt a new steel in my spine. The real war, the professional one, was just beginning. And for that I was more than ready. The sight of them together, their facade crumbling, had been the final dose of fuel I needed. It was time to dismantle his kingdom brick by brick. The Sydney office of Vagarasi Strategies became my sanctuary and my command center. It was a bright, modern space with a view of the harbor that still sometimes took my breath away. Here I shed the last vestiges of the wronged woman. I became a machine of focused, intelligent ambition. Julian handled the big-picture client relations and the Australian market with his easy charm. My domain was our expansion into Asia and, most pointedly, our strategic re-entry into the North American market, Gabriel's turf. I had come prepared. In the stunned, heartbroken hours after our anniversary, while Gabriel was still in Milan basking in his triumph, I had accessed his cloud drive. He was brilliant but lazy about security. He'd used the same password for years. My birthday. A final, bitter irony. I had downloaded everything. His meticulous strategic plans for the next 2 years, his target client lists with personal notes on each CO, his beautifully crafted pitch decks, his brutally honest analyses of his competitors' weaknesses. I didn't just use them. I improved them. I knew these strategies inside and out because I had helped create most of them in the first place. I knew his tells, his weaknesses, his tendency to get arrogant in the final stages and overlook crucial details. My proposals were his, but sharper, more responsive, more cleverly priced. I offered a personal touch he'd long since abandoned for aloof grandeur. I was his ghost, his better angel, and now his most formidable competitor. The poaching began with a quiet, ruthless efficiency that was breathtaking even to me. It wasn't malicious. It was business. And I was simply better at it. The first major victory was a crown jewel tech firm, NextGen Systems, that Gabriel had been courting for over a year. I knew their CEO was frustrated with Gabriel's increasingly high-handed attitude. My pitch was less a sales presentation and more a collaboration. I spoke their language, anticipated their concerns, and offered a partnership, not patronage. They signed with Vagarasi. Then came Ethelred Manufacturing, a giant whose multi-million-dollar renewal was coming up with Thorne and Crestwell. I met their general counsel for coffee. I didn't badmouth Gabriel. I simply presented a vision that was more agile, more cost-effective, and more attuned to their global ambitions. They began exclusive talks with us. I was a ghost from his past, come to haunt his present and systematically dismantle his future. The performance agreement he'd signed at the height of his power, guaranteeing a certain revenue stream to his partners, was now a sword hanging over his head. The whispers that filtered back through the legal grapevine were satisfying. Gabriel was scrambling. He was working 18-hour days, flying coach to meet with second-tier clients, taking on desperate low-margin cases to make his numbers. The polished veneer was cracking under the strain. Sophia, ever the loyal propagandist, documented it all on social media with a stunning lack of self-awareness. He works so hard, my lion. I'll be by his side until he rises again. Hashtag partnership goals. The post was riddled with typos. Midnight oil burning for my king. They don't know his strength. Hashtag we will rise. I almost felt sorry for her. Rise again? She could barely spell it. The idea of her helping him was a tragicomic stretch. One late night, after a 14-hour day finalizing a contract for a new client in Singapore, I left the office. The summer air was still warm. I decided to cut through the small park near my apartment building to clear my head. The city lights reflected off the harbor, and for a moment, everything was peaceful. A figure unfolded itself from a shadowed bench, startling me. Gabriel. He looked like a ghost of his former self. He'd lost a dangerous amount of weight. His suit, once tailored to perfection, hung off his frame like a sack. His face was ashen and gaunt, his lips chapped and cracked. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. Isabella. His voice was a hoarse, broken thing, barely a whisper. Do you really hate me that much? You want to see me destroyed? Ruined? Is that what this is? I stopped, keeping a respectable distance, my hand tightening on the strap of my laptop bag. I don't hate you, Gabriel. This is just the market. It's fair competition. Did you forget? I'm a lawyer too. The words were calm, professional, and utterly devoid of the history that lay between us. He was silent for a long moment, staring at the ground as if the answers were written in the grass. If all you want is to see me knocked back to nothing, to where I started, he whispered, the words catching in his throat, I'll let you. I don't care. I'll give it all up. Everything. As long as you come back. The offer was so pathetic, so utterly divorced from reality, that my smile was thin and cold. But I'm not willing to give up everything. I just don't want you. I took a step closer, forcing him to meet my gaze. And are you really giving it up? Or have you already lost it all? Be honest with yourself for once. Tell me, if you were still on top right now, riding high, would you be here? Would you be on your knees in a park in Sydney begging me to take you back? No. You'd be in your penthouse with your new lover, thinking you'd done your utmost, and that I was just an ungrateful, stubborn bitch who couldn't appreciate your greatness. I saw the truth of it hit him like a physical blow. The faint, desperate hope in his eyes guttered and died, replaced by a hollow acknowledgement. He had no answer. I turned to leave. Isabella, he called out, the word a raw, desperate plea. He stumbled forward a step. I still love you. The words were torn from him, filled with a pain that might have been real. His face was twisted in genuine agony. I've never loved anyone else. I never even slept with her. That day in the hospital, I was just trying to hurt you, to make you jealous. I swear on my life, on my parents' graves, I have never betrayed you. Not in my heart, not in my soul. The performance was epic in its delusion. I almost applauded. Instead, I sighed with theatrical exasperation, as if dealing with a particularly stubborn child. I reached into my leather tote and pulled out a small, innocuous USB drive. Innocent until proven guilty, right? Well, the burden of proof is on the one making the claim. I held up the drive between my thumb and forefinger. You remember the dashcam software in the Range Rover? The one with the high-def interior motion sensor and audio recording? A little feature you bragged about for client security? The car is still legally in my name. That makes all the footage, all the audio legally mine. Admissible evidence. You understand that, don't you? Or do I need to play back the audio for you? The very detailed, very specific audio from the night you got back from Sydney after you came here to beg? The night you and Sophia didn't sleep together in the back seat? You two really are in the wrong profession. The Oscars are missing two stellar performers. All the color drained from Gabriel's face, then flooded back in a deep, mortified purple. He had no counter-argument, no lie left to spin. The USB drive was a key, and I had just unlocked his every deception. He simply stood there, exposed and utterly defeated, a man watching the final walls of his life crumble to dust. Then, to my utter astonishment, he slowly, painfully, lowered himself to his knees on the grass. His shoulders began to shake. I know I was wrong, he choked out, his voice thick with tears. I admit it. I'm admitting everything. Can't you just forgive me this once? It was a pitiful sight. The mighty Gabriel Thorne brought to his knees in a public park. A crab apple tree above us shed a few pink petals, one landing softly in his disheveled hair. It was a grotesque parody of a romantic moment, a twisted echo of a past I had long since buried. A long-buried memory surfaced, unbidden. Our first date under a similar tree on campus. He'd plucked a blossom from my hair, his touch shy, his eyes full of awe and promise. A strange, cold calm settled over me. The anger, the disgust, it all receded, leaving behind a vast empty space. And into that space a plan, cold and brilliant and final, inserted itself. I let my own voice soften, imbuing it with a heartbreaking tremor. I placed my hand on my lower abdomen, a gesture of unconscious, vulnerable femininity. Gabriel, I began, my voice barely a whisper. If you want our 10 years to mean anything, if you want there to be one single decent memory left, then let's just part with a little grace. Just answer me one thing. Have you ever wondered why? Why on our 10th anniversary I called you over and over and over again? His eyes widened, confused by the shift, by the sudden vulnerability in my tone. I was going to tell you something, I whispered, and a single perfect tear traced a path down my cheek. I let it fall. I was going to tell you we were going to have a baby. The blood drained from his face completely. His gaze snapped to my stomach, a wild, desperate hope flaring in his eyes. The hope of a man seeing a lifeline. You're pregnant? Isabella, my God, we can fix this. We'll get married tomorrow. Let me make it up to you. To the baby. We can have everything back. I bent slightly toward him, my expression one of devastating, profound sorrow. That day. In the hospital. After I saw you and her. After I heard what you were doing. I went to a clinic. I ended it. His eyes rolled back in his head. A raw, animal sound of agony was torn from his throat. A sound I didn't know a human could make. His whole body convulsed and he collapsed forward onto the grass, his body racked with brutal, unforgiving sobs that seemed to tear him apart from the inside out. You killed our child? He gasped into the dirt. How could you be so heartless? My voice broke, wavering with impeccable timing. The doctor said, after the first miscarriage my body was too weak. This surgery, it damaged everything. I can never get pregnant again. We walked together for 10 years and you're the one who betrayed me. You threw our child away first. Now for the sake of that unborn soul, let me go. If you have any conscience left at all, you'll let me go. By the end, my voice was a barely audible whisper, thick with unspeakable grief. I turned away. I wiped the single tear from my cheek, my expression smoothing into one of cold, dry resolve. I walked away, my strides long and firm, leaving the broken man weeping in the dark, his world finally, completely and irrevocably destroyed. Damn, I thought, a shiver of cold, ruthless satisfaction running through me. Maybe I should have been an actress. The story about the pregnancy was a spur-of-the-moment masterpiece of psychological warfare. The real reason for my calls had been a news alert about a random act of violence in Milan. I'd been frantic with fear for his safety. But he didn't need to know that. Let his conscience, what little of it remained, torture him for the rest of his days. Let him believe that if he'd just picked up the phone he could have had it all. His career, his family, his future. He wouldn't blame himself, of course. He'd blame Sophia. And they would make each other exquisitely, perfectly miserable for all time. The destruction of Gabriel Thorne was swift and absolute. After the night in the park, I didn't need to lift another finger. The momentum I had built was a tidal wave and he was just a man standing on the shore. The clients continued to defect to Vagarasi strategies. The ones who stayed with Thorne and Crestwell demanded steeper discounts, sensing blood in the water. The performance agreement he'd signed in his hubris became an unmeetable noose. Within a year his partners had no choice. They invoked the penalty clause. He was bankrupt. His assets, the penthouse, the cars, the investments, the trappings of a life we had built together, were seized and sold off. His name was added to the national defaulter list, a digital scarlet letter that would follow him forever. The gossips were relentless. I heard through the grapevine that he married Sophia. The wedding was a sad, shabby affair in a rented community hall, with barely 20 guests. The photos that surfaced online, probably leaked by a sympathetic friend, were telling. They showed a gaunt, hollow-eyed Gabriel and a pinched, unhappy Sophia in a dress that tried too hard. No one knew why they did it. Perhaps out of some twisted sense of obligation forged in mutual ruin, perhaps because they had burned every other bridge and had no one else left. After that, they disappeared from the city, vanishing into the anonymous sprawl of a middle American town I'd never heard of, their dreams of grandeur reduced to dust and debt. I threw myself into my work with Julian. Vagarasi's strategies flourished, becoming a respected and feared name in cross-Pacific business law. The victory was sweet, but it was also just work. It was my work. The fire of revenge had burned out, leaving behind the steady, satisfying glow of professional accomplishment. I traveled often for business, but now it was on my terms. I made a point to visit my parents in Colorado, rebuilding those bridges with a newfound humility and gratitude. My mother never said, "I told you so," but the relief and pride in her eyes when she saw me, truly saw me confident and whole again, was worth more than any apology. I changed my number. Old classmates and acquaintances still occasionally reached out through social media trying to pry or mediate. "Isabella, are you and Gabriel really done? He's a mess. You two were epic. This is so sad. He says it was just an emotional affair with a clingy girl. You're really going to throw away a decade over that?" I didn't bother to explain. I had learned there was no such thing as true empathy in these situations. People just wanted the drama. I simply changed my social media status to single. Focused on business and self-discovery. Do not contact me about my ex. The peace that followed was immediate and profound. I built a new life, a fulfilling one on my own terms. The past was a closed book, a lesson learned at a high cost. I had lost 10 years, but I had reclaimed myself. And that, I decided as I sat in my Sydney office looking out at the brilliant harbor, was the only victory that truly mattered. Years later, the news found me. I was in my office, preparing for a video conference with a client in Singapore, when a push notification flashed on my secondary monitor. It was from a legal news aggregator I followed. The headline was brutal and succinct. Former high-flying lawyer sentenced in domestic tragedy. A cold, detached curiosity made me click the link. The article was brief, the language sterile and legalistic. A drunken argument. A struggle on a steep staircase. A pregnant woman, 8 months along, pushed by her husband. She fell. The baby did not survive. The woman, one Sophia Thorne, suffered a catastrophic spinal injury and was paralyzed from the waist down. The husband, one Gabriel Thorne, claimed it was a tragic accident. The prosecution argued vehemently for intent, painting a picture of a man consumed by financial despair and rage. The evidence, including a history of domestic disputes and witness testimony about his volatile state, was enough. He was found guilty of manslaughter and aggravated assault. Sentence: 10 years in a state penitentiary. A grainy old photo of Gabriel from his partnership announcement at Thorne and Crestwell smiled smugly next to the text. The contrast was chilling. I sat very still for a long moment, the words on the screen blurring slightly. I expected to feel something: triumph, vindication, even pity. But I felt nothing. It was as if I were reading about characters in a bleak, poorly written novel I had started but never bothered to finish. They had been poison for each other. The ambitious, amoral man and the vain, grasping woman. Their union, born of betrayal and insecurity, could only ever end in ruin. I had been the catalyst, the instrument of their downfall, but the fatal flaws were entirely their own. This was the inevitable conclusion of the path they had chosen the moment they decided their wants were more important than anyone else's truth. I turned off the monitor, the image of his face vanishing into blackness. I took a slow, deep breath, centering myself in the quiet, sunlit office. The past was not just a closed book. It was ash on the wind, scattered and gone. I looked out my window at the stunning, vibrant view of Sydney Harbour, the sails of the Opera House gleaming in the afternoon sun. My life, my successful firm, my partnership with the kind and brilliant Julian, the hard-won respect I had earned, it was all a bright, beautiful reality I had built for myself with my own 2 hands. The chapter of Gabriel Thorne was finally, irrevocably, over. There was no moral, no grand lesson. There was only life, stretching out ahead of me, wide open and full of promise. I picked up my headset, a professional calm settling over me. I clicked the button to connect the video call. "Good morning, Mr. Lee," I said, my voice warm, confident, and utterly my own. "Thank you for your patience. Shall we begin?" The story of Isabella Rossi was just getting started. The end.